about these subjects. He actually is the person who helped me produce my huh broadcasting. What up? Anyway, like I said, well, it's gone. So, oh, my frat brother. Anyway, like I was saying, the conversation generally centers around spiritual subjects, but we talk about everything. We try to relate it back to what we've learned. But I want you guys to watch this Sadhguru lecture before I have a discussion about this topic on the near-death experience. The other lecture is a little bit longer, and I think I'll have to save that one because it's on memory, consciousness, and it's over an hour long. But I think this one we can do. This one right here, I think we can do. Hold on a second. If I can just get it to stay focused. All right, good deal. Let's go. So, I want to hear about your thoughts on real life experience. A lot of people have in surgery said that middle surgery they could come out and see what's happening, see the conversation, what the doctor is doing. So, just a thought, do people really die at the time, or they reach some moksha or heaven, come back? Near death. You mean near death? Yes, near death. Near life. Yeah. So when I saw you, I saw like near death experience. There's near death experiences where, let's say, someone is about to die. Very often, we've read these accounts. Like Dr. Sanjay Gupta's book talks about these, like cheating death. In which case, they then have these experiences where they may see lights or what have you. So I just want to distinguish this because they're two different cases. Okay, all right. Anyway, when we say death, the definition of death on one level is you lost your body. So, let's not go to other areas that get to very fuzzy places. About near-death experience, it's what is being referred to as meditation. We have a certain kind of meditation called shunya. That means shunya literally translates as emptiness. That's not the right translation, but there's no appropriate word for this. So it's emptiness or nothingness. So if you settle down into shunya meditation, it's not near death, it's actually death. But conscious death. Suppose you're riding a bicycle. You are a new rider with little balance, so you will go like this. Some other kid is riding. He'll leave his hands free and whistle and look here, look there and ride and do all kinds of things, stand up on the handlebar and turn around, jump, all this. Why? It's a certain mastery, certain balance and mastery. Now, you can jump off the cycle and again jump back and do all these things. Similarly with your body, if you have a certain amount of mastery, you can jump off and jump back quite effortlessly. Now it is happening accidentally because of some medication, or for many people during 60s, 70s, the LSD time, there were a whole lot of people talking about this thing. Sir, it's your time. It was your time. Oh, okay. Hello, 10 people. Welcome. So, a whole lot of people talking about this, and it really happened to them. It's not that they were imagining things, it actually happened to many of them. But it was also because it was hallucinatory. Nobody knows whether it's this or that. There's no way to for sure say it actually happened to them or not. But I've met many people of those types who genuinely experience things with which their lives got transformed in many different ways, in a crazy way. But suddenly everything about them changed simply because somewhere they perceived this, you can yo-yo this body a little bit if you wish, it's not a permanent thing. Just that little awareness changed the way they perceive life and they behave and they do things in their life. So this near death, I'm not really looked at any of the thing, but some people have told me, some popular books, they were saying they see angels and there's a tunnel going. See, one thing is, you must understand, when somebody is going on the surgery table, the doctors may be confident, the patient always fears that he may die. Hello? Doctors may be confident, they know the case, they know what they're doing. 99% of the time, they're confident what they're doing. But the patient, once he closes his eyes and hands over his life to somebody, he always fears what will happen. So every small thing he thinks is death. It happens to people. If you put a gun to somebody's head and just shoot and miss them or it's a blank, they almost die. Near-death experience, they'll blank out for some time and then they come back. They really think they went away and they came back. And they saw the scene also from the top, because that's because of the Hollywood. So, human mind is capable of creating many dimensions of experiences. It need not be construed as death, it's life. First of all, anyway, I'm coming out with a book on death, an inside story. I'm doing this for 6.5 years, it's not complete yet. Hopefully, in the next year or so, I will come out with this. Why I'm saying this is, in reality, there is no such thing as death. It's life, life and life alone, moving from one dimension to another, another dimension to another. So if I lose one dimension, it looks like that is death. Right now, it is a medical fact that they say approximately every fortnight, you're losing 7 kilograms of your existing body and something new has come in one fortnight. Whatever your weight, you must just calculate in how many fortnights you completely lost. Everything that you have in your body is being lost continuously and something else is coming in. But you don't experience as that every meal and every day you empty your bowels, you must experience it as near death. But that doesn't happen to you. But this happens to you because there is some disengagement in your experience, first particularly because of anesthetic impact. The disengagement with various faculties that you're normally used to suddenly makes you feel you're dead. Nobody died. It's a completely wrong perception. Yes, every moment of your life, if you are willing, if you are not entangled with situations and your own thoughts and emotions, there are many, many things you can perceive right here. Right here, sitting here, you can look at your life from there, okay? This is not near death, this is life. But because, as I said, loss of faculties works out well for a lot of people, unfortunately. It's not a good thing. This happened. A man met a close friend of his that he knew very well when they were in the university together, after 25 years break. So he invited home for dinner, he went, and being an Indian household, the wife was serving, and these two men were eating. And every time he wanted to ask for something from his wife, he said, my honey, my sweetie pie, my boo-boo-boo, my coco-coo, my bulbul, and whatever else, your family, so my tangam and my chuchu, all those things. So after the dinner was over, the friend was leaving, and he said, you are having an amazing life, aren't you? I'm married with my wife for 15 years, we can't even look at each other's face. The way, the endearments you're showering upon your wife is truly fantastic. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you called her Bulbul, you called her Tangam, you called her this. I said, oh man, I forgot her name 7 years ago. Loss of faculties, unfortunately, work very well for a lot of people because they are suffering their faculties. greatest faculties that have come to us after millions of years of evolution, unfortunately we suffer because we have not read the user's manual.
So the second lecture, which I won't show today, but I'll show you guys, is on memory, consciousness, and coma. It's also at Harvard by Sadhguru.
Now of how anesthesia actually causes loss of consciousness.
We'll watch a little bit, not the whole thing.
It's a pleasure to share the stage with.
I've seen this lecture before, but it's been a long time.
So, how does anesthesia work? Actually, how many people here had anesthesia? Great topic, right? Yeah, right.
A lot of clients out there.
Exactly, right. All right, fantastic. So what happened to you? Some people say we turn the brain off, or we make you unconscious, we put you in a coma. But I think so we've tried to really understand what's happened. And we've done this by doing a number of studies in humans as well as in animals. And so I'll just give you the quick back of the envelope way to think about it. When you take the anesthesia drugs, or when they're given to you by the anesthesiologist, the brain isn't turned off. It's not like all of a sudden the switch flips. If you look at what happens to the brain, it's actually in a highly, highly dynamic state. It's really, the actual circuits in the brain are oscillating. They're creating waves. And to give you some sense of this, if you look at my hands like this, and they're oscillating now, this is the way your brain is in a normal state of, forgive me, consciousness, right? All right? As I understand it in my little limited way, all right? But then what happens is the drugs take over the circuits, and now the circuits oscillate like this. And as long as you keep the drugs there, they're doing that. Now, what does that mean? It means that if this brain area was communicating with that brain area so that you could be conscious, it can no longer do that. When you turn the drugs off, the brain returns. As long as you keep the drugs on, it does this. It creates these oscillations. It's very much like this YouTube video, which I'm sure some of you have seen, where you have a bridge in Tacoma, Washington. I don't know if you've seen this, the bridge in Tacoma, Washington. And all of a sudden, it starts to oscillate in a perfect sine wave, just like this. And no traffic can go across the bridge. It's the same thing that happens under anesthesia. And what happens is that these oscillations, because they're so strong, they take over the brain, they're not natural. And remember, one of the things that Bala mentioned was that after anesthesia, our brains often don't work the way they did beforehand. So now you can see if you've been in a state like this for 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, and look, I got my AARP card about 12 years ago myself, so I'm in that category too, right? You can understand why your brain may not work, right? So, and basically that's it. And what's good about that, what's good about what I'm telling you is that we as anesthesiologists can see this state. We can see it on the EEG of patients in the operating room, and we can use it to change the way we deliver our drugs. That's the practical implication of this. And then the other practical implication of it is that as we take anesthesia seriously, in other words, don't say, oh, we just give you drugs and you go away and you come back. As we take it seriously and study it, then we can start interacting with our neurology colleagues and make links between problems that they're working on. We can actually begin to have conversations with distinguished individuals like Sadhguru, who can help us understand what is it we're actually doing on a deeper level. But if we haven't taken what we do seriously in terms of what's happening in the brain, we're not in that position. And that's where I'd like to think that we're trying to move the research now to, in other words, use anesthesia, the study of anesthesia, to help us connect with some of these deeper ideas about the brain, the mind, and also consciousness.
David, do you have any thoughts on that? Do you have any thoughts on how we're connecting anesthesia to?
Yeah. So what we work on as neurologists, or what I work on, is very related and very, very connected in that we're trying to understand how patients who lose consciousness because they've had a structural brain injury or cardiac arrest or some other kind of problem can reestablish the process of a conscious state in a brain that's been injured, and what are the rules of the recovery, and what are the ways in which it can happen, and what are the limitations, and how do people get stuck along the way, and could we help them? And it turns out that there's a lot of variation.
Sadhguru.
Dr. Brown and Dr. Smith, having accomplished doctors in their areas of proficiency, but I'm completely unschooled. So, because for me, the only way I know anything I know is from my own experience. So my language and my expression could be a bit abrasive, or if it seems abrasive, please pardon me because I'm nearly illiterate. So, this, first of all, the nature of the language that we are speaking, I'm talking about English language. This language is very good for describing and defining external things, but it's very limited when it comes to internal dimensions of and aspects of who we are. So, if we have to use yogic terminology for this, what you're referring to as consciousness is considered as jagrati, that means wakefulness. We do not consider wakefulness as consciousness. Wakefulness is the state of the body. Wakefulness is the state of the mind. Wakefulness is the state of the bioenergies within us. But that's not consciousness. What you're seeing as physical body, well, one thing I would like to clarify is, we do not look as brain as a very significant aspect, because we see intelligences right across the system. Generally, in most people's understanding, I believe, a combination of memory and intelligence is considered as mind. Am I right? If you take this as a definition, it is a fact that every cell in our body carries millions of fold much more memory than the entire brain can carry. Because these cells in the body remember even what happened a million years ago. It remembers the skin tone of your forefathers from a million years. Nothing has changed. It never gets confused. So what you can carry in the brain as conscious memory, what every cell or every DNA is carrying, is phenomenally more. And the chemical dimension of what is being conducted in every cell is far more complex than you could ever figure with your entire brain. So both in terms of intelligence and memory, the spread is much more. I think this entire focus on brain has come mainly because somewhere, probably pre-Renaissance time, we broke into this because that reason, largely we're talking about Europe, where it was hugely dominated by very dogmatic belief systems. When people broke through that, nobody was supposed to think for themselves. Everything was already said and done. When people broke through that and started thinking for themselves, thinking little freely looked like absolute liberation for those people. And I think that hangover still lasts in our education systems, in our medical sciences,
Yes.
in the very way we are approaching even fundamental sciences. That hangover, that thought is everything, is very profoundly influencing our social structure and our way of exploration. In
In the yogic sciences, we don't attach any significance to your thought. Whatever you're thinking, it's of no consequence to me. This is why whatever somebody is saying, we don't listen to that. We just feel that. We just feel that. What is their chemistry? What is their… how they are right now. I don't care what they are saying. This is how… maybe it's an evolutionary problem with me, because I've been in jungles by myself and I've seen most creatures judge you just like this. I think they showed a picture of me having a king cobra. I've been very closely involved with all kinds of creatures, particularly cobras and things. Their sense of our chemistry is so keen. You can just go in the wild and just pick up a cobra. As you saw, I'm not holding him by his hand. He's not a pet cobra. He's a king cobra. If he bites you, he won't give you more than 20 to 40 minutes before you're done. But I'm just picking him up like this. He will do nothing because he is feeling my chemistry. If I show little agitation, he'll go for me. If I'm just, okay, he's fine with me. So, we don't attach any significance to thought, because thought is recycling of the data that we already gathered. No thought can come which is absolutely fresh. Permutations and combinations of the data that we already have. Right now, a lot of people coming up to me very fearfully and saying, Sadhguru, this artificial intelligence is coming. If they come, they will take over the world. I said, if they take over and run the damn thing, you're on a holiday, isn't it? But it is a fact that everything that we can gather as information, analyze and express and use it in many ways, all these things, machines will be doing it better than us in the next 10 to 15 years' time. Everything that is data-based process.
Hello, Edward.
Machines will do
Namaste, my friend.
So there is
Happy belated Father's Day, Edward.
Good time. This is the time we need to explore an intelligence beyond intellect. Because we have become so intellectual, we have become so brain-oriented in our approach to everything. As you rightly said, nothing is really turned off, we've just broken the communication. After all, the purpose is to go through something which is generally extremely painful.
Thank you. Appreciate it, brother.
That's how the entire anesthetic science has come up. So you're just breaking the communication, and that's not happening, it serves the purpose. So being wakeful and being conscious are two different things. This is described like this. For wakefulness, we have a word called Jagrati. Jagrati means you're awake. If 10 people, let's say we take example of 10 people, they all fell asleep, don't work. They all fell asleep and they came awake. When they come awake, all of them will not be equally awake. One person may be instantly awake, another person may take 2 minutes, as you have noticed with anesthesia also. Another person will take an hour to wake up, another person needs a strong coffee, otherwise she won't wake up. Right? Like this. Different levels of wakefulness is also there. Professors must have noticed.
Yes. In fact, the first 2 minutes of the day can be like that.
Different levels of wakefulness in a classroom. So this is Jagrati.
Okay.
So we are calling wakefulness as consciousness now. The next dimension of consciousness is called Swapna. This means a dream state. A dream state is far more vivid than wakeful state for most human beings. It's like going to a cinema. If you go to a cinema, the key factor of the impact of the cinema on you is turning off the lights. This is something most people don't understand. If you don't turn on the lights, cinema will be no good. It doesn't matter how well it's made. Turn on the lights and watch the cinema, you will see a great cinema becomes nothing. So turning off the lights is important. So turning off the lights in our experience is the eyelids. You down the shutters, the world is off. Now you start your own world. So dream state is like a cinema. It's far more impactful. People love their cinema stars more than the people that they've lived with for 25 years. But they have not even seen them. All they saw was play of light and sound. But that is far more impactful simply because lights are off. So idea is that you should roll it down, lights should be off, world should be closed. But right now, the problem is this mental faculty has not been taken care of, so it's running wild all the time with eyes closed. So this dream state is considered a more powerful state than Jagrati. Jagrati or wakefulness is important for performing action in the world. But for human consciousness, in terms of profoundness of experience, dream is always more profound than walking on the street. Yes, most of you have experienced this. The next state is called a susupti. Susupti means it is a dreamless state. But there are dimensions of consciousness that you are aware of. It's a totally dreamless sleep state, but you are aware. There is no picturization, there is no video running in your mind, there are no pictures, there are no people, there are no words, but you're conscious in your sleep. This is a very powerful state. If you really want to manifest something in your life, this is something to be explored. And the next one is called as Turiya. This is consciousness, where there is no memory involved of any kind. Essentially, in the yogic sciences, we are looking at consciousness as an intelligence beyond memory. If there is memory, memory is considered a boundary, in a sense. This is one person, this is another person, simply because this embodies one kind of memory and that embodies another kind of memory. This has become one kind of person, this has become another kind of person. Essentially, it is in the memory. Memory does not mean just what I remember and you remember. Genetic memory is there, evolutionary memory is there, elemental memory is there, atomic memory is there, karmic memory is there. Inarticulate and articulate memories are there, but generally we are thinking memory means consciously what we can remember. But today, if we eat dog food, we will not become dogs. Something within us remembers, no matter what you eat, this has to be only transformed into a human being. It doesn't matter what you eat. If you and a cow every day eat a mango, no merger will happen. Perfect memory is established. Evolutionary memory is absolute. So these different dimensions of memory are playing on a daily basis. People are thinking their thoughts are free. It's a joke. Because your memory is determining everything. So largely in one single word we call this karma.
Karma.
Karma means the residual impact of all the memory that you have. How it is impacting every thought, every emotion, every action, the very way you sit and stand. See, if you see somebody walking far away, let's say half a mile away, you see someone walking. If he's your friend, just the way they're moving their body, you say, oh, that's him. There are 7 billion plus people, but this particular man walks in a unique way. All right. Just do like walking, everybody walks, but still it is so unique. So this is what we are referring to as karma, the residual impact of memory, varieties of memory. We recognize memory as 8 basic forms of memory, which are determining how you are right now. The very way you sit, stand, breathe, understand, perceive life is determined by this memory. But there is an intelligence beyond memory, which we call as turiya or chitta. This is consciousness. Now, every one of us is conscious. The question is only of degree. Even a rock is conscious, a dog is conscious, a pig is conscious. The question is only of degree, how conscious. Even among us, how conscious is different from person to person. So, this degree of consciousness determines everything. Now, if we have to give an analogy, what is memory is like, I'm sure every one of us at some stage in our life, I don't know if you're still doing it, we blew soap bubbles. Did you? Hello?
Yeah.
Come on, everybody raise their
It's
hand.
about blowing soap bubbles. You just do it outside? Soap bubbles? My son's blowing soap bubbles right now outside the sauna.
So when you blow a soap bubble, the soap part of it, which is very little, it's just a tiny drop. The large part of it is air that it captures. So how big a bubble? When you were children, who can blow the biggest bubble was a big deal. And it's a certain amount of technique.
Yes.
How you do it. Somebody blew this big bubble, somebody got only this much. So how big a bubble? This bubble is like this. The kind of soap and how it gathers is your memory. It forms up, it gives it a form. But when the memory bursts, there is no such thing as your air and my air. There is no such thing as your consciousness and my consciousness. There is something called as your body and my body. There is something called as your memory and my memory. There is something called as your intellect and my intellect. But there is nothing called as your consciousness and my consciousness. How much of it did you capture? How big is your bubble will determine the scale of your life. The scale and possibilities of your life are determined by how big a bubble did you blow.
Okay.
I'm gonna stop right there. It's a 1 hour 27-minute lecture, July 17, 2018. A lot of things were hit in those two discussions, but mainly the discussion of the near-death experience and the second lecture, memory, consciousness, and coma. Myself, having thought about these things for many years now, and being very interested in this thing we call consciousness, memory, personality, etc., cognitive processes, emotions. This is all very important in medicine. Understanding these things allows us to help people and help alleviate suffering. That's the purpose of the medical sciences. And so I feel that if we do not fully understand these things and we do not open up our discussions like this discussion at Harvard, we're doing a disservice to humanity, to the very humanity that made it possible for us to even have this discussion in this infinite universe or multiverse that we live in. And I love what he said about the bubble, because this does seem to be the main source of our, let's say, suffering or our disagreements. Is one person's bubble, is this shape and color, round, but different colors, different size, as he said. And another person's bubble is another size, and it's composed of different colors because the spectrum. If you ever watch a bubble, I'm adding to his analogy for a reason, because if you watch the surface of a bubble, what happens is called refraction and reflection in physics, and this creates in physics, refraction and reflection create interference patterns. Okay, it can also be destructive, or it can enhance the wavelengths, if you will. But what generally happens, the result of that is you see these different shimmering colors on the outside of a bubble. And if you correlate that with each person, that's a good analogy for what we are. There's this backdrop, as he said, that the yogis just call pure consciousness. In Buddhism, it has different words too, but that's basically what it's referring to. If you listen to what he said even a rock has some level of this. And we call in neuroscience a coma a vegetative state. We don't say you're dead, you're in a vegetative state. Well, that appears to me, it appears to me that someone has equated some level of consciousness with a vegetable, a turnip, even after you pluck it out of the garden, even possibly, because if you recall, if you put a plant on a windowsill, it's not dead. If I put the potato back in the water, what happens? It grows. So we say things every day and we don't do what the contemplatives do, and which is sit with these different thoughts. these different ideas, and just be with them, and follow them down the rabbit hole as far as we can, and then we let them go, because nature of suffering is attachment. If we become too rigid in our viewpoints and what we quote unquote think we know, it creates suffering. Yesterday, I was talking to my nephew, and it was just a very painful experience for me because it appeared that when I tried to explain things on this level, what was coming back at me was this energy of, why are you trying to restrain me? And it was funny because I said to him, I said, I said, it's funny that I have one complete different perception of what I'm trying to do in this conversation. And I said, what you're sending back to me is is reinforcing for me, and it is informing me that you are completely misunderstanding this conversation. And that gets to the crux of human interactions and human mishaps and misfortunes when it comes to human interactions, because this is what's happening. The bubble's different sizes. The bubble is manifesting different colors. And if I'm not mistaken, if I remember my physics, the colors on the surface of a bubble depend on your angle, the angle at which you're standing from the bubble and perceiving the light. If you look at the road and you see a oil slick, you see the same effect, right? An oil slick on the road, and you see these shimmering colors. If you notice, as you move, the colors change. So it's your perception based on movement that is giving you a different perception of colors. All the colors are there. The rainbow is there. The shape of the rainbow, its wavy like nature, all depends on your perception, your angle of reception, if you will. And if we get into this argument that no, I have this shape for the colors, that's what the bubble's colors are, and the size of it, we get into a nonsensical argument. And a lot of what has happened historically has been nonsensical arguments. The mystical experience is an experience of this phenomenon. Okay? Every religion has a documented history of mystical experiences. When we take each religion's documented history of mystical experiences as being the end all, be all of the experience of consciousness and the mystical experiences, it creates and generates suffering for people, ourselves, and it is the seed necessary many times in history for war. War, and the very antithesis of what religion is supposed to be, which is peace and love, is generating war and discord. How does that happen? Because these phenomena are not appreciated for what they really are. Very open-ended, eternal phenomena, ever changing. In the in the lecture on death, he talked about uh, the levels of perception. If I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to remember the lecture in my mind. But really, what he said that struck me the most in the lecture that Sadhguru did on near death experiences, he said that there's just a perception of life. It's almost as if he just eliminated the word death completely from our vocabulary, and I think that's very profound. Maybe at some point in human evolution, we will eliminate the word death from our vocabulary. We will redefine it in such a way that this word death will not have the weight and the gravidity that it has in our culture, because the core of human suffering, this attachment, if you look at the descriptions of the process in yoga and Buddhism and the samsaric wheel of suffering, this is what happens in the wheel of suffering, the wheel of becoming. There is a manifestation, a perception, an attachment to this. It proceeds through what we call time and blossoms into whatever it blossoms into, a flower, uh, a conversation, a memory, an event. And then as this thing we call time continues on, this blossoming decays and transforms into something else. It's almost like a disintegration. But there's a saying in, I think it's in yoga or Buddhism, that I love. And it says that a flower is completely composed of non-flower elements, right? When you go into the flower to find the flower, you will not find it. You will find carbon, you will find hydrogen, you will find oxygen. And if you look at those close enough, you will find packets of wavelengths, the quantum mechanics, right? Energy that's being expressed at different wavelengths, different frequencies, right? Even the interference, constructive and destructive interference patterns and waves comes into play when you study quantum mechanics, right? And which is why we learned about the oil slicks in chemistry. I learned this stuff in chemistry in my graduate training about the refractive patterns you see in oil slicks and on the surface of a bubble. It's the same phenomenon, you see. So in the conversation that I had with my relative yesterday, and the very painful experience of not being able to communicate with my millennial relative, I had to step back, okay? And it was a quote from Bruce Lee that helped me. Bruce Lee said that if we become too bound to an emotional response, it generates suffering. And we have to let the emotional response pass through us and just let it be. And that seems and is another form of dharma or truth, cosmic truth, eternal truth. And I think our views of life and death in the West have very much been influenced by our language, our culture, our philosophy that came from the Greeks, which came from other cultures before them as well. And this inability to generate openness in each moment and see emptiness and form in each moment, I see it as being as the cause of suffering, because it's instinctual. You see, these thought patterns, these bubble surfaces that we create, these colors that we think we create. First of all, we don't create them. Secondly, our perception of them, because it's so rigid and it's so uh, rigid and attached very strongly, I can see now through my own work, my own meditation, this is definitely the cause of misunderstanding and of suffering. Now, what if, for instance, in Christianity, what if the great news that Jesus was trying to impart was simply this: that the thing you call death isn't even real? It's not even this thing you call an ending by in and of itself. It is completely 100% the same suchness as the blossoming of a flower, which contains no flower elements. Human being, which contains no human elements. You, whatever you call you, enter your name here. James, my name, contains no James elements. It is the same. It is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, etc., etc. And then if you look at those elements closely, there are patterns that are changing that within themselves are not the end of pattern formation. They are parts of larger patterns and larger patterns. And then this goes on for infinity. So this whole definition of emptiness is like that. It's saying everything depends on something else. And this view of death that we have as being a distinct state, a separate state from reality, in my opinion, in my own study, is a flawed view. It is deeply psychologically hindering. And it is, I suspect, at the core of many of our human wars and conflicts. Because the way we attach to this view of death is the same way we attach to other things. Our view of ourselves, when we have arguments with people and disagreements, when we in ourselves have conflict and emotional conflict, it's because we're unwilling to allow the process that is unfolding in front of us to take place. We are trying to hold on to something that happened in the past, or we perceive we want to happen in the future. We want to rewind the tape or fast forward it, because this right here that is going on, we do not desire to experience it. This is the core problem with the human experience and the source of human suffering. It has taken me, I'm 52 years old. My whole life has been studying life and death. That's my profession. It is my fascination. It is my obsession. And the more I study this subject, the more I understand that I don't really have anything to stand on. So I need to stop looking for things to stand on, because that's the whole nature of the thing. It's nothing to stand on, and this nothing is the source of everything. It's very much paradoxical, and I think that's why people don't. That's why people need symbol to make the paradoxical accessible. So when religion talks about life, death, rebirth, returning, and being reborn, we take these things so literal that it really does become a source of suffering. I see it. And if we loosen our viewpoints up a little bit, become a little more open minded, contemplate the thing, just let the process of contemplation do what it does without coming to these conclusions all the time. Because, you got to have conclusions in the West, because, you got to pay the bills. So we pay the bills with conclusions. The house is built. The paperwork is done, et cetera, et cetera. And as soon as we conclude the thing, it's already the new conditions have already arisen. Life and death are in each moment. It's obvious to me now, but that is an intellectual understanding. The spiritual experience is to see this in myself, the processes of life and death, of this eternal changing now moment, uh, being where this thing we call life or consciousness resides. It's fascinating hearing a guru and neuroscientists talk about this subject. My own experience, I will conclude with this, because I don't want to give you guys too much, because too much it's hard for you to really think about what's been given, and I think it's important that I don't give people too much and give them time to digest the things that I've said and things that I've shared. Um, I can't fully recall the date that I woke up from my cardiac arrest, and I don't know the conditions. It's very fuzzy in my mind. Okay, so the point I'm making is this: I was being placed into a medically induced sedation and cooled down so that my brain would not sustain any lasting or significant injury. This is a new process that neuroscience and internal, intensive care medicine has began using as protocols. And I suspect, I think what happened was the phenomena of children surviving death because they fell into cold water gave us insight into the process of slowing down the metabolism and the brain metabolism. If you listen to what Sadhguru said, he said yogis don't put a lot of weight on the brain itself, and we have become fascinated in the West via our European ancestry, I think, and Egyptian, because they were drilling holes in people's heads and snatching their brains out of their noses, I think. So we got to give them some credit too. Because if you remember the Egyptians, they put the organs in bottles, but the brain, if I'm not mistaken, was just pulled out of the nose and discarded with. Don't quote me on that, but it's kind of funny that we put all this effort into neuroscience, and the ancients said, give me the heart, give me the liver, give me the spleen or whatever. I can't remember what organs were in the bottles. The brain just kind of sucked it out and threw it away, right? And there's something funny about that. But um, when I recall coming back to any awareness, and I had the experience of talking to my father, my brother, and them telling me to come back, it wasn't my time. It was very much like a dream. Okay, it wasn't it wasn't fundamentally for me personally as a lifelong meditator and a person that's practiced dream yoga. It wasn't qualitatively that much different. And I wasn't surprised when I woke up that it wasn't that different, because I have looked at this intellectually and have some experience with looking at these different states in myself. We all struggle as practitioners, because the discipline to do this for a lifetime and keep deepening your insights and opening your heart, so to speak, and connecting the heart and the mind is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens through every process that we're taking. Watching a flower, talking to a relative, dying, being born, breathing. It's all included in this process, and it's not in a destiny. It's not. A destination. Sorry. I think it very much is an awareness of a process that we're trying to generate. And this whole thing about I need to get somewhere, it is a form of attachment, I think, that hinders us in the West. So it was amazing to me that my experience of almost dying was very close to what I had experienced in deep dreaming, deep sleeping, and deep meditative states. But if you really listen close to what the yogis were saying and do say and have said throughout history, that's what it is. It's a continuum of experiences that this energy we call consciousness is able to generate, and it's likely no end to what it can generate. I think we're being very limiting in our descriptions sometimes of what consciousness in the very state of just being is able to generate. And there's likely, no doubt in my mind, the state of being and consciousness, we're really describing one and the same process. I think that's what we're gonna finally figure out in the future. And we can continue to codify the experience with religious experience, with different individuals, different points of consciousness, different avatars that come to give us this information, so that we don't completely annihilate ourselves on the planet Earth through our own ignorance. But if you remain open-minded and continue to look at, and listen to this type of knowledge, I think what happens is you start to compare it to your own experiences. And then the curiosity and the intellectual curiosity and the spiritual curiosity should push you to where you want to do your own investigation, like any good scientist. Which means you're gonna have to become aware of yourself in each moment, likely meditate, pray, which to me is just a form of meditation. It's no different in the different types of meditation. But the joy and the love and the compassion for me come from this understanding that most likely what I've learned in my life is that when I was born, that was an illusion. Death is also an illusion. And there's just this state of being. And there's different levels of being. And that's it. And this is in some eternal now moment that will always be, always has been. This is very profound. And it should put a smile on your face, because what it should do for some people, if they've arrived at that point, it should make you say, "Oh, wow, how silly of me to be so judgmental or attached to this form, your form. You know, spirituality for me is very much a process of just constantly reminding ourselves of these fundamental truths that we have come to understand through our own contemplation and childlike curiosity that carries us to these places. Unless you be as a child, right? So I like the first video. I really like because it really what he said was that we're just describing life. That's it. Different levels. Even the word level doesn't do it justice because level is very much a Western mindset. You see, that's why I pause a lot when I talk, because the more I study, the more I learn the limitations of language. Level implies up and above and below, left and right, which don't really exist. Okay, just like the illusion of death. You know, um, you could even you could and should maybe even come to a point where you say, well, if death is an illusion, is life? That's a valid discussion, right? I don't see why that can't be put on the table. But all it does is open up the conversation, really. It opens it up. The practical application of this knowledge is in our everyday interactions with people, our everyday interactions with ourselves, when we experience loss or gain, you know, um, life or death. We have an ability, if we have this wisdom, to take these experiences and put them into a framework that's much more, much larger than our own ego or personality complexes that we've created. And when we finally have conflict, my experience is that this wisdom, this knowledge, this contemplation can help. It's almost like putting water on the fire. That's really what it is. The fire may be anger, it may be discord in my own mind, and this is the only wisdom I know of in my own experience that helps me put things back into perspective. Because really, the root fears that we succumb to as human beings are the same: fear of loss, fear of instability, fear of death, fear of loss of whatever we perceive ourselves as having, a title, a stature in society. All these things in the family unit, right? These things are challenged, as they will be forever. Whatever is will lose that isness and become something else in the next moment. That's the nature of reality that I can see from my own insight. And that also is a part of everyday interactions. And we would forget that. What I see happening as a human being is this dramatic whirlwind of emotional turmoil. Um, I think the reason we need to study this is multiple, but the process of dissolution and reforming can be very confusing, can be very tumultuous. If you look at the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there's a reason they read that book to the dying. They are aware of these processes. They are gurus. There is a yogic tradition in Tibet that goes way back, and they are aware of these processes via which the human entity manifests and dissolves. And they understand that there's the potential, great potential for suffering in the transition, which is always happening. And this ignorance creates, the potential there for fear, attachment, aversion, etc., etc. And because likely we have levels of perception in between, being whatever this is, then the same processes that generate suffering here generate suffering in the in between state. In Tibet, they call them the bardos, the in between state. We're always in between. We're always moving on to something else. So we're using symbol to describe something which can't fully be described because it never stops moving. It never is that. We can divide time into infinitely small increments, and we still won't contain the thing itself. That's the paradox that we have to just be okay with, because that's the nature of it, right? But I do see now, at this point in Western history, that this view of death that we've had for so long, it's changing. It's becoming expanded. Medical science, psychology, metaphysics, ancient metaphysics are all coming into play because we have access to this information because of the computer, because of the written record. And it's remarkable and amazing to see this story that we once as human beings were able to put together about the nature of our reality come back together, but be advanced by the modern man in our day and age having his input into the thing as well, but using the ancient knowledge and wisdom as well. So hopefully hopefully this helps someone um, expand their viewpoint on the thing we call life and death. Because I can tell you, after what 30 years now for me of studying this subject and practicing this type of spirituality, that is still a day-to-day struggle. Not the same as it was 20 years ago. Of course not. Of course not. But I think our inability to penetrate into the nature of the thing itself and hold on to the things that we are so endeared, which, if you study yoga and Buddhism, our body is one of the greatest attachments we have. When we finally are charged with the dissolution of the body and the mind, it's very scary. It's very fearful. It creates anger. It creates the stages of death and dying that we talk about in death and dying classes, and the book that was written by Kubler-Ross, Death and Dying. Anger, denial, rejection, depression, and finally acceptance. When we understand these processes as being an emotional response to our misunderstanding of ourselves, we have the ability to short circuit the process sometimes if we have good insight and practice. And once we short circuit the process, I think what happens is we go back to a state of openness, and the potentiality that comes from the state of openness is the same potentiality that the universe uses to create everything. So we have infinite potential to create when we're not so attached. But when we restrict ourselves down to a point and we're just this or we're just that, you're just this or you're just that, it is a source, is a seed, and the water and the sunlight that helps suffering blossom. So thanks for hanging with me. As always, Namaste. Be peace.